Okay, and welcome into this new edition of the Global Cricket Radio. It's the Great Cricket Debate with myself and John Morrison. How are you, John?
Yeah, good morning, Andrew. How are you, mate? You back home in Bali?
Yeah, I am, and I got to went and watched a bit of cricket yesterday. Actually, I watched Indonesia play the Philippines here at the Bali Oval. It was rather pleasant, actually. Yeah, good match. Went down to the very last ball, and the Filipina bowler, that's what they call the side. They call them the Filipinas. He managed to elude the bat of the Indonesian batsman, and the Philippines won by 2 runs off the very last ball. And he was quite a tall off spinner, or left arm orthodox spinner, and I thought, looks pretty tall for a Filipina guy, or Filipino as they call them, men, but the men in the Philippines, but the Filipinas is actually the name of the team. But I thought, he looks pretty tall. And anyway, I had a look down the team sheet, and it looks like more or less the entire team play their cricket elsewhere, but have heritage from the Philippines. So I think he was probably an Aussie or a Kiwi or something.
What was the pitch like?
Oh, they play on an artificial wicket, but the ground itself's very nice. The boundaries are okay. They're a little bit short, and a bit like many of those club grounds in places like New Zealand. There's sort of trees and bushes, so they go through a fair few cricket balls, John.
Yeah, it'll be a good place to look for them. Obviously, it's like golf balls, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, totally like a golf course. But anyway, so that was quite nice to see. They're just having I guess the common term these days is bilaterals. But I think these guys just want to play as much cricket as possible. And the Philippine side are over here for, they're here for 5 days actually. They're playing twice today. They might be playing twice again tomorrow, and then Christmas Day is a day off, and then they play again. So, yeah, it was good fun. Not much of a crowd or anything, but there's some talented players. So, yeah, I'll probably head along again at some point. But anyway, good to be back in Bali. But I
went to the Basin Reserve course in Wellington yesterday with the grandkids, and watched a double header. The Wellington Blaze were playing the Otago Sparks in the first game, the women's game. Second game was the men, the Firebirds versus the whatever their name is, the Volts, I think. Everybody's got a name now, haven't they? I mean, it was far easier when it was Wellington Otago. But anyway, they were entertaining games. Wellington won both. There was some good batting in the men's. It was a young guy, Robinson, who whacked 139 off about 65 deliveries, which was entertaining. He's striking the ball very well, actually. It was a bit of mayhem down Adelaide Road and Cambridge Terrace. So it was an entertaining afternoon and very pleasant. No wind at the Basin Reserve, Andrew. So
lovely.
Yeah, good stuff.
Oh, well, there's probably not too much debate coming out of those matches, but there's certainly debate going on elsewhere. And maybe we could start with the situation with Usman Khawaja, actually, because I think the Tom Curran one might go on a little bit longer. So maybe let's start with Khawaja. What have you made of the situation with the ICC? Well, first of all, Khawaja obviously wanted to, display a message on his playing shoes with respect to what's happening in the Middle East at the moment. Then he must have caught wind of the fact that wasn't going to be permissible, so he ended up wearing a black armband, which he's just said yesterday was for a personal family or personal grievance, not grievance, but a death in the family or something. He didn't elaborate on what it was, but I mean, first of all, do you think that's actually true? And second of all, do you think he should have been reprimanded by the ICC?
Well, I think the difficulty and everyone recognises and respects people wanting to and being upset about issues, human rights issues around the world, but we can't start having stuff written all over cricket players because we're trying to play an international game. We've got religion involved, we've got all sorts of political, we've got a variety of countries with very different views on political things, and we've got ongoing violence around the world. I mean, we'll finish up like a newspaper if the team walks on the field with messages all over its shirt. So I actually think that while I can respect Khawaja to a degree, I think he's been foolish. He's got a great privilege to be in the Australian cricket team. The rules are pretty straightforward, guys. You can express your distress any time of the day, anywhere else, about situations in Gaza or Ukraine or wherever. But really, we've got to maintain that the cricket field is for cricket gear and no messages as such, political, sexual, whatever, religious. So yeah, I have a feeling that this is going to end in tears if he continues to ignore the rules, which are pretty simple. And while he respects human rights, don't we all? I mean, I know a few people around the world don't, but to suggest that he's the only one who's at the ground or watching TV that respects human rights, it's a bit pretentious, isn't it? So my take on it is stop all this nonsense and get on with your cricket. You've had a sort of second life in cricket and it's been great and you've done well. I've always respected you, but I'll stop respecting you if you can't see the logic and the sense of just getting on with it. That's my view on it, Andrew.
Yeah, yeah, okay. I mean, I just found that the fact that he tried to claim that the black armband was unrelated to his stance on what's happening in Gaza, and I, but he didn't elaborate on it. The ICC obviously clearly didn't believe him, but that just makes me think about something else. Wasn't that long ago. It was the 2003 World Cup when Henry Olonga and Andy Flower wore those black armbands. And they were pretty clear in the message that they gave at the time. That we're seeing the death of democracy in Zimbabwe, and this was during an ICC event. Of course, it was during a World Cup. And of course, that caused a bit of a stir, and it got a lot of international attention. And neither Andy or Henry played for Zimbabwe ever again after that. But I had to go back and check what actually happened. The ICC didn't even deem it to be an offence in the end. So there was no punishment, no reprimand, no nothing. So they got off scot-free, so to speak, from an ICC standpoint, whereas Khawaja got charged. So it seems to me like I know it was 20 years ago, but it's still the same body. And it's almost like it's become even more sensitive now than it was 20 years ago. And I'd say that, protesting against your own government is pretty up there in terms of the things that you can say on a cricket field, and they weren't charged with anything.
Yeah, I think there are more danger from Mugabe, to be quite frank. Andrew, he wasn't known for his leniency or his flexibility, was he? And of course, they were Zimbabwe residents, so I would have thought it was a very dangerous move to be protesting against your basically dictator who was known worldwide as a pretty strange sort of guy that cleaned anybody out that was of any problem. But yeah, so I see that as a slightly different thing. But I had the instance where in one of my very few appointments as match referee in Bangladesh, the Under-19 World Cup, a number of years ago, and Bangladesh were playing Pakistan, and both the managers of both teams came to me as match referee and said, "You're a match referee. Look, both our sides are Muslim. We would like to stop on the hour to pray. And, you okay with that?" And I said, "No, this is an ICC game. It's under ICC rules. Religion is not meant to be part of the playing process. Otherwise, we'll have all sorts of stoppages for all sorts of things." And I believe that the ICC are right in that. Otherwise, there'll be no end to it. And there's so many different religions playing the game that if we let that creep in, I wasn't very popular, I might add. And they both, I did tell the little guy that was sitting outside my room, was an old First World War British 303, to stay awake that night. I don't know whether he did or not. I don't know whether he had any ammunition in the gun. He wouldn't let me have a look at it, although I do know a bit about guns. But anyway, that's my view. And I think, as I said before, the Khawaja, is going down a dangerous road, and he might finish up a martyr here, and I don't think that's much good for him. And he's had a second life with Australia, and as I say, it's been very good. But don't push it, mate. You might find yourself that they're not even going to bother with you because it's too much trouble.
Well, just to finish it off, Cricket Australia released a statement, or they put something out on Twitter yesterday, and that the headline was, Usman Khawaja is hopeful the ICC will approve a proposal for him to make a gesture advocating for human rights during the Boxing Day test. And Nick Hockley, the CEO, was quoted as saying, "The work we've been doing since, basically since the armband reprimand, is to see if there's a respectful way that is very much unifying, that brings people together to allow Uzi to share his message." So that is the subject of ICC consideration. So, I mean, the story hasn't finished, and I guess we'll see where it leads. But let's switch let's switch over to this other issue with Tom Curran, who received a 4-game suspension by Cricket Australia for the incident involving the fourth umpire. So this was in a Sixers matches a few weeks ago. I think it was on the 11th of December. I think the whole world has seen the footage. So whilst there's a case still going on, because the Sydney Sixers are appealing it, their CEO's come out and said that they're appealing it. The whole world has seen what actually happened. So yeah, I mean, there's so many aspects to this, but first of all, what did you make of what happened on the field in the warm up prior to that match with Tom Curran?
Well, it's Andrew. I think that Tom Curran was being a bit of a dickhead, to be honest. It was obvious that it's obvious to anyone that's played cricket at a reasonable level, you're not allowed to run on the pitch, and that was a new pitch. And he'd done that at one end and then ran up the other end. I do think that the umpire, and I've got a snatcher against umpires and referees that have YouTubes and Instagram and do all sorts of things. So they think they're superstars, and they're usually rather officious and pretentious little men that get a little bit of the old clipboard and whistle power. And he seems very much this guy. What's his name, Andrew?
Mohammed Qureshi. Yeah, he's on the Cricket Australia's panel of umpires from well, from each state. So he's from Tasmania.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's one of their officials. Yeah.
Yeah, so he stood there in a very, I thought, also intimidating fashion. I mean, a far better approach would have surely been to walk up to Tom Curran and say, Tom, mate, the rule's pretty simple, pal. Just don't run on the pitch. If you do, I'll have to report you. I don't want to do that. But you can run anywhere else on the ground, and you can run along the pitch next to it. And I think he could have diffused it quite well. And if Curran still ran down, he obviously had soft shoes on. He could report him for running on the pitch, which is better than intimidation and everyone standing defiant. But it doesn't change the fact that Curran was a dickhead. But what it does, I think, mean that a marvelous article which you sent me, which I've read about Mitchell Johnson's comment, was the applause of Mitchell Johnson in the light of the unbelievably sycophantic and herd mentality of the sports journalist brigade, who pee in the pocket of the administration all the time and always agree. And so the tide of opinion against Tom Curran has been so predictable from all those sycophants. Although you sent me a little note from Brad Hogg, who
Yeah.
had some sense about it, saying, hang on a minute, this umpire was also intimidating.
Yeah.
Maybe he should be ticked off as well.
Well,
So,
I'll just read what Brad Hogg actually said. So Brad Hogg, replying to I mean, first of all, Seven Cricket, right? Seven Cricket put out a tweet with the footage, which I think the whole world's seen now. But their title was "The Vision That Everyone's Been Waiting For." So, well, first of all, why does it come from them? Why were they allowed to put it out while the case is still going on? Why, why, they're not the sort of the controllers of this sort of thing. But anyway, that's what they did, and it went viral around the world. But what Brad Hogg said was, not Tom's brightest moment, but the umpire's at fault too. Rather than walking closer to Tom in a non-confrontational manner, with a smile to de-escalate the situation, he stood in an intimidating manner and seemingly looking for confrontation. Right, and I think that was a bit that caught my eye, because what I don't understand about this current situation, and I think Brad Hogg's the only person I've read amongst a lot of people online that said, hold on, there's got to be, well, he hasn't said as much, but I've been thinking there's got to be something more to this. Why would Curran be such a dickhead, as you so eloquently put it? It just seems weird to me. But I do take your point that the media in particular, and the fans too, but particularly the media, because they're the ones that the fans can sort of latch on to their comments. Everyone beyond everyone has just condemned Curran, condemned the Sixers for appealing, and I just thought Brad Hogg I offered a different perspective on it. And it seems that you and Brad are in a boat of two at the moment, John. Maybe Mitchell Johnson
yeah,
will have something to say about it at some point.
yeah. Well, I think we've got to stop promoting umpires and referees as personalities. They're out doing speeches, kissing babies, opening bridges, for God's sake. They're meant to be adjudicating. The Yanks have got the idea the American sport is run by the official. They don't even name them. So they're not personalities. I mean, we had Billy Bowden in New Zealand. I mean, I remember commentating a game in Eden Park, and he miscounted three 6-ball overs. I don't know, either 5 balls or 7. And but he was performing like a trained SEAL, with 4s and 6 signaling. And he obviously sat up half the night and watched or rewatched the game and picked up the fact that I was critical of him. And he had a wee crack at me at the reception in the morning. And I said, well, Billy, why don't you learn how to count to 6 before you start doing the hokey tokey? Um, and he said, oh, that's a bit. I said that we're not here to watch you, pal. We're here to watch the cricketers. And you're meant to be adjudicating. If it's 4, just signal 4. Don't prance around the outfield like a cock pheasant.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing.
But
And I'm citing him, but we've got other cases around the world
yeah,
where
no,
these
no,
guys have
I
become
know.
personalities.
Absolutely. I mean, and I suppose, yeah. Well, rugby's a good example.
Yeah.
The referees get so much attention now because the rules have allowed it to become that way with, going to the TMO and all this sort of stuff, and football's going the same way, and the referees are starting to get vilified now. People are starting to find out more about who they are, but it's kind of almost not their fault. But in this case, I just want to bring it back to the Tom Curran thing. So I, whilst I was trying to find out a bit about who the umpire was, because no one even really mentioned who he was. It was just it was all just having a go at Tom Curran for his position, for what he did, and then the Sixers for, thinking it was even worth an appeal. I looked up Muhammad Qureshi, and yeah, he does have a YouTube channel. And back in June, he actually released a video on YouTube. It was an explainer basically, but he said this is the job of the fourth umpire, and essentially what he was saying was that the fourth umpire is like a go-between the on-field umpires and the players. Much in the same way that the fourth official in football is. But one of the things he said that the job of the fourth umpire is to rope off the pitch before play. So my question is, while many people are saying, well, the umpire was doing his job, my position is, well, he wasn't doing his job. If he was doing his job, this situation would never have happened in the first place. It would have been a rope around the wicket, and Tom Curran would have had to jump over the rope. So I think he is partly to blame because he didn't do his job properly.
No, it's a fair point. I mean, virtually every top level cricket match you go to, before the start of play, there is a rope around the playing pitch. For obvious reasons, they don't want anyone to run on the damn thing. So the point you make's probably certainly holds water, Andrew, in the sense that maybe he well, that's why I think, it worries me, and you've confirmed that he's got a YouTube channel and he does this and he does that. So he's looking to be a star, isn't he?
Well,
That's my
I don't know if
problem.
well, I don't know if he's trying to be a star. He's most of it's just kind of educational stuff. But like I say, I just found it interesting that he'd actually made a video precisely on the thing that he's now complaining. Well, I'm not sure he made the complaint, but he's giving evidence. He definitely gave evidence against Tom Curran because that came out. Of course, the full details of the hearing haven't come out, but he did give evidence. But I'm just like, well, if you'd just done your job properly, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. So that's probably the main thing I feel the most strongly about. But just in terms of the appeal itself, I mean, another angle on it has been, fans around the world saying, well, what are they appealing against? The whole world can see that he intimidated the bowler. But I saw a comment from Jamie Cox, the former Australian first class player, saying, I'd love to know what the Sixers are actually looking at, because the CEO, I forget her surname, Rachel something or other from the Sixers, said we're appealing, having taken legal advice. And when that comes up, it's like, oh, you've got the lawyers involved. Now it's going to become a sideshow. It's a bit like the whole Novak Djokovic thing a couple of years ago. So I decided to have a really good look at the playing regulation itself. And to be honest, it was very hard to find. And I'm reasonably adept at these things, having trained as a lawyer.
Umpire.
But no, as a lawyer, to
No,
look.
the umpire will be loving it. The fact that he's in the spotlight, mate.
Yeah, true.
But I appreciate the point you're making about the lawyer. But I'm just adding that my view on the umpire is I bet he's loving it.
Right. Well, yes, of course, it raises his profile, I guess. It's like that whole thing is, all coverage is good coverage. But what it boils down to, and I think this is what Jamie Cox was getting at, is what does the rule actually say? And it's interesting that all the press have just essentially quoted what's come out from Cricket Australia. No one, it seems, has actually gone back to look at the rule. So the summary of the rule basically is that Curran would have had to intend. Okay, so that's the first thing. He's got to intend to intimidate in a way that would cause the umpire fear of injury or harm. Right, so that's a pretty high standard you're going to have to get to, first and foremost. And second of all, this law, or this regulation under the code of conduct, it applies during a match, not in the warm-ups. So just from a purely legal standpoint, I think that the commissioner, or whoever it was that made the ruling that Curran should be banned, I'm not sure that it's made on good grounds, actually, legally, and I think that's why the Sixers are appealing. So I think there's a long way to go with this yet, and it it doesn't reflect great on the Cricket Australia legal department, actually, because what they also could have done, right, is they could have actually brought the charge for, verbal abuse to the umpire, which is a different provision. Maybe the fine couldn't have been as much, or the sentence couldn't have been as much. But and it's since emerged that apparently Tom Curran called the umpire, something pretty nasty. But Cricket Australia won't be able to then if the Curran's appeal succeeds, Cricket Australia won't be able to fall back on the abuse provision, because you can't try the guy twice for the same offence. So I can see Curran actually getting out of this. I really can, because I don't believe, from what I've seen in the image, that Curran actually intended to injure the umpire. I really don't. Maybe, and
No,
I
no.
and I don't think the umpire can genuinely say he feared injury or harm either. I think, that's, if he did, he would have moved out of the way.
Yeah, no. Well, you were of course well versed in the law, having studied it for some years, Andrew. But uh, all those points are interesting. The other problem is, of course, there's games going on. So there's 4 game suspension. He's already lost 1 game. By the time they resolve this, the whole BBL thing will be over.
Yeah, that's also true. Although the Sixers will be obviously trying to push for it to get done, but now we're into the weekend, aren't we? And then we're into Christmas, and
Yeah.
there might not be anyone available. You might get called up, actually. Uh,
The
but
phone's
anyway,
been pretty silent lately, Andrew.
yeah.
But
So we'll watch to see
mm,
how this story unfolds.
yeah,
I'll tell you something interesting. I know we're going to come and talk about media generally with Mitchell Johnson, but just as a random aside, I saw I don't think that's got much coverage, but for the Australian Open tennis coming up in January, do you know that the media are going to have to provide a police clearance to go to
yeah,
the,
I read that. Read
and
that.
I
That's it.
I found that astonishing, and related to that, Pakistan's playing a warm-up match at the Junction Oval, and no fans or media are allowed to go. And presumably it's because they don't have sort of security protocols in place or something, because it was a bit of a last minute request. Although you've got to understand, think why on earth have they had to do this at the very last minute? I mean, everyone's known Pakistan's touring for a long time, but what do you make of that? The media having to produce a police check? Doesn't that seem a bit over the top?
Oh, I think that things have gone so far, and it also gets into that territory of health and safety, and the bureaucrats are just having a field day around the world, and sports grounds are suffering, because they're lowering the capacity because we can't have too many people, and there's rules about this and there's rules about that, and they've got to inspect everything. The stadium in Wellington is a good example. When you arrive, you get told with a loudspeaker that sounds a bit like being in the Viet Cong. If you've got any booze on you, you'll be thrown out. If you run on the ground, you'll be tackled and booted out and locked up. And it's hardly welcoming your guests.
Yeah.
And
I just found it strange. I mean, the media thing's one thing, but I just found it strange that, Pakistan's playing Victoria in a warm-up match at the Junction Oval. I mean, this would be a perfect way for ordinary fans just to go along and watch some good cricket with their parents, and they're not allowed to go. The media is not allowed to go. It seems weird. And I mean, if I had to produce a police record to prove that, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what they're even checking for in a police record. What, am I going to steal all their coke, or, I don't know. It just seemed a bit strange to me. And I just think things that seem to be going on in Australian sport at the moment just seem a little bit weird. And I suppose the other thing is, it's like, well, it was a long time ago when all Australians had convictions. I mean, not everyone does now.
It's the heritage, though, Andrew. You've got to remember that. There's still a few scars on the old ankles over there. And, I was asked at Sydney Airport, because I hadn't filled out my form because I thought I was with a group who had done it. And the guy was going through, he said, any convictions? And I said, I didn't know you still needed one. Um,
Anyway,
over amused because they do employ people at airports with very little sense of humour, don't they?
That's very true. It's very true.
Yes.
Well, it's not bad in Indonesia these days, I must say. And but yeah, it's I suppose a lot of all of this is coming. It's coming around, Cricket Australia, and how they're running their game. That they have a role to play in the Khawaja situation. They've got a role to play in the Curran situation. Now fans and media can't go to a match involving Pakistan against Victoria. But even more bizarre is their treatment of Mitchell Johnson. I mean, the article you referred to was that it was the editor of the Western Australian saying, well, thank God we've got people like Mitchell Johnson in the game that have actually got something to say, unlike everyone else who just follows exactly what everyone else says, the herd mentality that you mentioned. But what do you make of Cricket Australia's treatment of Mitchell Johnson in the last few days?
Oh, extraordinary but predictable, because I think that what's happened with sport is the sporting bodies have got more and more powerful, and the media people have got more meeker and meeker, and more frightened. And what happens is, they can close off teams and practices and interviews with players, and that's exactly what they do. So Mitchell Johnson comes out with an article that I thought was very fair and probably 100% correct. Okay, he had a go at Warner. Well, there's plenty of material to work with there. And then, he's immediately thrown out of 2 speaking engagements at the test at Western Australia, and replaced by Mike Hussey, who probably toes the line pretty well. I haven't heard anything controversial coming from him. but it's appalling. I thought it would be more valuable for Mitchell Johnson to be the speaker, given that he's indicated he's prepared to say things. Certainly more interesting than a pitter-patter speech, meandering through a career and saying what everyone else agrees with. So, yeah, what I make of it, and it's not dissimilar in New Zealand, and I'm sure it's similar around the world. But if you come out and criticise selectors or New Zealand cricket, you won't get an invite to the next cocktail do. Well, you probably won't even get an invite to the game. You certainly won't get an invite to the aftermatch or lunch. And I've experienced that on a few occasions. And it really is disturbing. So we don't get any sensible, I've got a real problem at the moment with New Zealand selectors. I mean, Ravindra and Glenn Phillips, for example, and Ajaz Patel. I mean, the inconsistency is just extraordinary. And you wonder how the hell they come up with this, but no one says anything.
Yeah.
The whole bloody world wanted to know about Ravindra, and we won't play him in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
He's our biggest marketing tool for years. The whole of India were fascinated by him, and justifiably so. He scored 3 great centuries and a whole bunch of runs, and we won't play him. I mean, now is that incompetence? Is it racism? Is it what? And then Glenn Phillips wins the bloody game. It's his 3rd test, and he's about 28. He hasn't had a test for 5 years. The first test he did play, I was at Sydney, and he scored 50 in a losing side, again battling against the odds when everyone else, including Henry Nicholls, had fallen over for virtually nothing. And there's no argument. And then Ajaz Patel, who got 14 wickets, 10 in one innings in Mumbai against India, for God's sake. He flies home, and the next test is at Bay Oval in Tauranga or Mount Maunganui, and it's a dry turning wicket. And he doesn't even get in the squad. He's just got 14 wickets, doesn't get in the squad. And Bangladesh beat New Zealand. They spun them out. New Zealand didn't have any spinners.
Yeah, the selection is always a matter of debate. I agree with you with Phillips, by the way. I just can't. No one challenges it, is what you're saying. And I
Yeah,
think,
it's extraordinary.
yeah, well,
It really is.
their privileges would get cut off probably. Probably wouldn't be able to go to
Absolutely.
the ground. But just with Mitchell Johnson, I mean, if I was a guest at one of those functions, I'd want him to be the speaker because he's actually going to say something really interesting. But Cricket Australia obviously wants to protect their players, even though Warner's decided that he's going to leave and pack up after the Sydney Test. I really hope they lose that test, actually, just simply so he doesn't have such a good send-off and he doesn't make any runs. But it's funny with Mitchell Johnson. I saw on Instagram yesterday, he's now been invited by Cricket Australia to their annual awards ceremony. So you just wonder what's going on in these organizations? Who runs them? How do they get to these points?
Well, you see, I think their reaction is very resistant. And then I would say a lot of people have said exactly what you said. Look, I wanted to hear him. I paid $250 to go to a luncheon to listen to Mitchell Johnson. I didn't go to listen to Michael Hussey, or I bought the tickets when Mitchell Johnson was the speaker.
Yeah.
And so to dump the speaker because he said something that you don't like. And then, of course, they think, oh, dear, oh me, we're getting into trouble here, so we better change. Or we better invite him to something.
Yeah.
Or no, gee whiz, and say there's no problems there. No, what can we invite him to? Well, let's invite him to the next test.
Yeah. Anyway, John, look, we've just come to the top of the show. Look, thanks very much for your time and being with me again on the Great Cricket Debate. I'm sure there'll be something to debate again soon, and we'll see you next time.
Too right, mate. All the best.